This account was discovered on a laptop that was found along 36 Highway near Mcmahon, Missouri. It is one of over a dozen entries left by Calvin Bruce, a former St. Louis police sergeant who went missing in 2021. Bruce served with distinction, earning commendations for valor, merit, and community engagement. He was the recipient of a captain's letter of accommodation, and according to this researcher's efforts, was known as an honorable man, even after he lost his position with the department. My name is Calvin, but most just call me Cal, and I'm a cop. At least I think I am. I don't know if this will ever even reach anyone who will care, but I feel like it's important to keep a log of what's happened to me, if for no other reason than to simply document, if not report on, the seriously weird situation that I find myself in. Some of this has been entirely outside my purview of experience, or reality for that matter. I had been a St. Louis police officer for close to 10 years, until I was canned. I was, and well, I am a good cop. I'm very, very good at my job, but I also know that a lot of my success came from the cooperation and teamwork of my fellow officers. And if I'm being honest, it was my lack of cooperation, and moreover, my lack of self-control that kept getting me into trouble, until it finally caught up with me. I blame no one but myself for my being dismissed, certainly not the department, but I doubt I changed my actions at this point. I seem to be the highest authority around here, and I have no subordinates. I mean, there's not even a mayor, and I think I made a pretty damn good first impression. So, I feel no particular compunction towards decorum, as I'm currently the one who sets uniform code. So I'm just going to be blunt, honestly. I got into most of the trouble that led me to Shady Oaks because of excessive force. The first couple of times it was this shithead who tried to sell meth to a 12-year-old, and even though I had wanted to hurt him badly anyway, I only lost my temper when he hit me in the head with a bottle. He wound up in the hospital for 2 months, and I wound up getting a demotion. After that, there were a few more, all very similar situations. There was the child molester who tried to explain to me how it was really his victim's fault because they were constantly seducing him. I only hit him once, but it was enough because it was in front of a couple witnesses. My career had a lot of ups and downs because of this kind of thing. Like I said, I'm pretty good at what I do, and I'm not a glory hog. There have been plenty of arrests that I didn't care about sharing credit on, but that the officers I've worked with will tell you I'm the reason they were made. So I got accolades, but I also got busted, twice. My COs always thought of me as a valuable, highly effective pain in the ass, and I don't blame them, except for Norton. He could go fuck himself. The proverbial straw that broke the camel's back was when I took part in a raid on a hotel that was a transfer for a major human trafficking ring. We went in and cleared every room in that place and pulled out almost 30 kids. We also made something like a dozen arrests, all of which led to convictions. In one of the rooms we found one of these pieces of shit assaulting a girl who could not have been more than 14. He didn't stop, even when we burst in, and it was like he knew he was going to prison, so he didn't care. I made him care. I bashed his skull into the wall, and while he didn't die, more's the pity, he's not going to be doing that to anyone else ever again. So I got fired. It sucked, but there was no choice. It was clear-cut excessive force, and with all my other citations and problems, I didn't even bother arguing the point. My union rep was kind of annoyed, but I didn't have a leg to stand on, and besides, I didn't know how much longer I could do the job. There's only so much human evil you can tolerate before you snap, and my threshold for that shit was getting pretty low. I was honestly lucky that I didn't lose my license, and I knew it. I decided to find a smaller department or maybe a job with another agency entirely. Thought about the highway patrol, but they require a lot of training, and you can't have any issues like I did. I had kind of settled on trying for a job with the sheriff's department somewhere else in Missouri, since I knew the legal code already. But I soon discovered that my reputation was going to be a problem anywhere that I went. I had all but given up hope of getting a job in law enforcement and was looking down the barrel of private security when I kind of got a bizarre letter in the mail. The envelope looked old, but the ink that was written on it looked recently written. The return address was from the township of Shady Oaks, which I noted as odd because most towns are really cities and are officially referred to as such. The letter, which I will put into the file with this log, explained that Shady Oaks, which was a town in northern Missouri just off of the 36 highway, had recently lost their chief of police and needed a replacement. And it went on to say that it had been brought to the attention of certain parties that I was in need of employment and that my skills and experience would be invaluable to the community here. It was signed Adam Fitch, town clerk. I must have read that letter 6 times and checked the stationery over and over again. There was no phone number or social media, not even an email address. Nothing about it made much sense at all, but I needed the job, and they said they'd hire me on the spot. And so I packed up a couple of days' worth of clothes, and I headed west. It was a nice drive once I got out of the city, and I hit this nice restaurant called the Pert Tree for lunch. I remember thinking that if Shady Oaks was anything like that town, I'd probably quickly learn to like it. But I could never have even fathomed what I was walking into. Shady Oaks was supposed to be somewhere around 36, between Mcmahon and the next big city, Chillicothe. So when I wound up there, I knew I'd gone too far. And so after grabbing some gas, I got back on the highway heading the other direction. I figured it was a turnoff, which might mean that it was just easier to see from the other side anyway. However, I wound up driving for another hour and arriving back in Macon where I'd started. I was so pissed at that point because I just wasted a ton of gas and still had no idea where I was going. I checked Google Maps again, but Shady Oaks wasn't on there, which sounds way more unusual now than it had at the time. I also asked a couple of people at the gas station and the attendant, and no one had even heard of the town, which did weird me out, but more pissed me off, because I started to wonder if it was a practical joke from some of the guys at my old precinct. I checked the letter again to see if there was anything that might give more information about Shady Oaks' location, and I noticed that there was a mention of the nearby town of Buckland, which I remembered seeing signs for on my way west. So I got back into my car and started heading there. After another half an hour on the highway, I found the turnoff for Buckland, and I took it. The area was mostly farming communities, so there were a lot of freshly seeded fields, as it was early April. Interspersed around those fields was plenty of timber, red oaks, white oak, cedar. It went out as far as the eye could see, which wasn't too far because of all the trees. Anyway, I went on for about another 20 minutes, my intent being to get to Buckland and ask around there for directions to Shady Oaks. However, just as I figured I was around my destination, I spotted an oddly angled turnoff with an old sign that was covered in rust. I stopped my SUV and looked out at it, but it was way too grody to read clearly, and so I got out. When I initially got out of my car, I realized, rather suddenly, that I had gotten way later than I thought. I don't know if I'd spent too much time getting lunch, or if it just took longer than the 2 hours I thought I'd spent on the road, but it was starting to get dark. Not like sunset, just getting there. I walked over to the sign and saw that, despite the rust and the grime, it absolutely read Shady Oaks. It was also one of those old brown signs, the kind you see in quaint old towns, which this place obviously was, which was part of why it had been hard to read. I got back into my vehicle and pressed on down the road, which again kinda went off at an odd angle from the road I'd been on. On this road were absolutely no farms or fields of any kind, just trees and more trees, which kinda gave me pause. When I wondered about old buddies or frenemies of mine from my old precinct playing a trick, something else had occurred to me, and the idea of it had been gnawing at the back of my mind for miles. What if whoever sent the letter was someone I'd put away? Whoever reads this might not know it, but there is a very, very real and legitimate fear amongst law enforcement. Someone whose cousin you arrested and got convicted decides that they don't like it and decides to waste you. It has happened before, make no mistake, and it can happen to any cop, especially when there aren't cops anymore. The further I got down this heavily wooded road, the gladder I was that I never left home without my concealed carry. I had, as luck would have it, also packed my Remington 12 gauge, and I admit freely that my only explanation for that decision was that I was going out to the boonies and didn't know what to expect. Or who. Regardless, the drive was taking a while, and it just kept getting darker and darker. But part of that was the trees, which kind of grew up, out, and over the road, creating this eerie canopy. Not a whole lot of light was getting through it, and the road itself being pretty narrow didn't help matters. It made it darker, but it also made it hard to maneuver around bends or hills, because you never knew what was coming, so I had to take it slow. I came over one such hill and almost ran right into a car, just stopped right in the roadway. I was immediately suspicious because the driver's side door was open and the lights were on. Every instinct in me told me just to go around it, and I almost did. But then I heard the scream. It was a woman, and it was nearby, and I could tell that it wasn't fake or a cougar or something. I'd heard this kind of scream before, from someone who genuinely fears for their life. I bit my lip, gritted my teeth, and ripped the steering wheel, and then promptly reached back for my shotgun and got out of the vehicle. I checked the load, even though I remembered loading it, and moved cautiously over to the car that was stopped, checking to make sure no one was inside. It had clearly been abandoned in a hurry, and recently. I scanned the vehicle and noted that the back and front tires had been slashed, which was likely why the driver had stopped. Another scream pierced the silence of the darkening road, and I turned to cautiously scan the tree line and called back to the woman, who was clearly in distress. To my relief, she sounded back almost immediately, giving me a clear indication of her direction. She was clearly within the trees on the north side of the road and didn't sound too far away, so I locked my SUV and moved off in that direction. I was in full-on response mode at this point. I popped out my pocket flashlight and popped it on to the hardware for my Remington so that I could see where I was going. Every time I heard the woman call out, I called back, trying to reassure her and encourage her to keep calling so that I could find her. It didn't actually take long to find where she was hiding. The poor woman had 2 long scratches along her back and another on her thigh that had cut clear through her jeans. She tried to stand the minute she saw me, and I remember being afraid when I saw the desperation in her eyes. But also really grateful that I'd found her. I bent down to check on her wounds, but she reached up and grabbed me, desperately pulling on me to get her up. I tried to reason with her that we needed to make sure she wasn't badly injured before she moved. And what she replied to me made me freeze. "It's above us," the woman whispered harshly, as she pulled up on me, practically climbing onto me. "We have to get the hell out of here." Before I could process the implications of what that could possibly mean, I heard a bizarre hiss from above me. It was like nothing, and I mean nothing, that I've ever heard before. I'm not even sure how to describe it accurately, but it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I reflexively stepped over the woman to cover her as I lifted the barrel of my Remington up at whatever it was. And there, braced between 3 branches, was a horrific thing out of some nightmare. It was human-looking and almost looked a little like a guy in some kind of suit, but I knew that it wasn't. Its teeth were huge, razor-sharp fangs, and its eyes glowed red in an odd, disturbing pulse. Its hands, which gripped 2 different branches, terminated in claws, like white, bony talons. Hell, at the time I didn't know what the hell I was looking at, but I knew what came next. The thing hissed again as I shined the light in its eyes on purpose, and it leapt down out of the tree towards us both. It crashed into me and slammed me to the ground hard. I remember screaming because my thigh hit something sharp. One of this thing's claws, I think. We both scrambled then because it was disorienting for sure, and I couldn't get my shotgun out from under the thing. Now in front of me, the woman screamed again, and I felt a pang of worry for her and fear that I'd not be able to protect her. I think I told her to run or get away, but I can't exactly remember because everything happened so quickly. I just remember getting up and running for the road, and this thing seemed to notice and tried to go after her. When I realized this was happening, I let go of my shotgun and I grabbed at it. The creature forgot all about the woman and turned its attention back to me, which is what I'd wanted, but now I was fully aware of the thing's weight. Suddenly, it was like I had 4 guys in full tactical gear piling on my ass at one of those pain-in-the-ass trainings for tactical readiness. I was glad I'd not skipped any of those, because I don't know how I'd have been able to handle this otherwise, as the shotgun was no longer an option, and this thing had put its whole weight on me. I could tell it was trying to rear its back for a bite, or a claw like a wild animal or something. I didn't bother trying to match its strength, but squirmed my hand into my waistband to get my Glock. The thing hissed, and being so close, I could smell the horrible stench of what I knew to be death on its breath. This thing had killed and eaten a human being, and not too terribly long ago. Its knee pressed onto my chest so hard I thought it was going to crack a rib, and it tried to swipe at me quick with its lower claw, but I held my other arm up to block it. It hissed again, and I tried not to gag as it reared back up for a bite, which I knew was coming for my neck. My fingers found purchase on the magazine of my gun, and I pulled as hard as I could. The weapon slipped out of my waistband holster, and I spidered my fingers around the grip tightly. I had it out and up into this thing's gut a second later, and I didn't hesitate, nor did I give any warning. I just popped 6 rounds right into the thing. It screeched out into the growing twilight and scrambled away from me, but I sat up after it and fired 3 more rounds, 2 of which I know hit it. Before I could get to my shotgun to finish it off, it was gone. And I wasn't interested in chasing the thing around the woods, especially with this lady that could be bleeding out. I holstered my pistol and grabbed my Remington and moved back out to the road, calling out to the woman as I went. Now, I did quickly find her on the road, and she looked like she was heading toward her own car, but when she heard and saw me, she stopped. I helped her into the passenger side of my vehicle, and as I was closing the door, we both heard the hiss again. I slammed the door shut and dove over the hood of my SUV to get to the other side quickly. I got in, got it going, and peeled the hell out of there as fast as I could. Now, it was a long minute before either of us spoke, but when it happened, it was me telling her that we needed to get her to the hospital. But oddly, she refused, saying that we would never make it and that I needed to take her into Shady Oaks, to the retail clinic inside the supermarket there. I thought this was such an odd request, but I guess a lot of rural communities often had a lot of services in one place, and so I didn't argue. I just kept driving, my head on a swivel at either side of the road. I told the woman that my name was Calvin, and she told me that her name was Wanda. I then asked her if she knew what the thing that attacked us was, and she just said that nobody knew what they were. I was a little jarred by how calm she was. At least I was at the time. I mean, she was still shaken up by the actual attack. But she wasn't freaking out about the creature, or monster, or whatever the hell it was. We broke away from the wooded road and onto a rather roughly paved thoroughfare, lit dimly by those old-style amber-colored streetlights. The canopy above broke only a little to reveal that dusk was fully upon us. I followed Wanda's directions to the supermarket, which only kind of looked open. I pulled up right in front of it and got out to help her to the door, but when we got there, we found it locked. I cursed, thinking that we were out of luck, but Wanda banged on the door in an odd pattern. 2 solid knocks, 3 little ones, then another solid knock. She repeated this pattern twice more, and finally someone came to the door. It was a middle-aged guy, and he was carrying a .30-06 with him. I wanted to ask what the hell was going on, but I was really worried about her wounds. And when this guy saw them, he seemed to be as well, as he quickly ushered us inside. Once we were inside, he locked the door up again and led us through the front area of the store, which, while furnished like a modern store, had some very, very odd products. Rather than boxed or canned goods, the shelves were filled with glass jars, sacks, and bottles, which all looked like they were filled with dried goods or homemade food. It was odd, but I had other things on my mind at the present. I got Wanda over to the area of the grocery store, which was obviously a walk-in clinic, and set her down in a chair. She thanked me, and the guy who let us in put down his rifle and started checking her out. He asked who I was, and I told him my name and why I'd come to Shady Oaks. When I mentioned the chief of police, both he and Wanda kind of tensed, but didn't say anything. I asked him his own name, and he told me that he was Lenny, and that he was the grocer and the nurse for the clinic. Once I was sure Wanda was going to be alright, which she assured me she was, I asked where I could find Adam Fitch, the city clerk, or the mayor. Both Lena and Wanda announced in unison that the town didn't have a mayor, then seemed to realize that they kind of yelled and looked sheepish again. Lenny then said that I wanted Adam, and that he'd be over at the town hall, but that I ought to go quickly, and use the same knock Wanda had used to get in there. Now, I kind of had enough at that point, and cut Lenny off to demand from both of them what the hell was going on. but they just shook their heads and told me that Adam would answer all of my questions. I wasn't a cop anymore. At least, not yet. So I didn't have the authority to press them. So I just said, screw it, and left. Lenny followed me out, and as I got to the door, which had like 6 locks on it, he reminded me of the knock. 2, 3, 1. Seconds after I was outside, all those locks re-engaged, and I heard Lenny walking away from the door. I looked around the parking lot, which suddenly seemed ominous and very, very dark, and reflexively stuck my hand into my waistband and thumbed the grip of my gun. Rather than wonder at what might be out in those shadows, I quickly got into my SUV and drove into the direction Wanda had told me the town hall was. I found it quickly, as it was one of those fortress-like old city halls that was built before World War II. I parked on the street and paused to reload my Glock, then stared at my shotgun for a solid minute before deciding to carry it with me. I figured that the only person who was likely to tell me I couldn't bring it inside was, well, me. And besides, if that thing had somehow followed me, or worse, there were more of them, I wanted to be prepared. The walk to the main door of the hall was one of the longest I'd have ever taken, and I've taken some long walks. When I got to the door, I immediately did knock, and it occurred to me at the time that I should maybe have just left. But not only did that seem like a really bad idea just then, but I found myself far too curious about everything to just let it go. I kind of needed to know what the hell was happening. I only needed to repeat the knock once before someone came to the door and let me in. It was an older guy, gray hair, wearing an old chief's hat. He asked who I was. When I told him my name, I asked if he was Adam. He admitted he was, but didn't seem to register until I told him about the letter. When I mentioned it, he leaned back, took a deep breath, then invited me inside. Adam offered me a coffee, but I refused, then I changed my mind. As he was getting me a cup from a really old coffee maker, he explained that he didn't actually send me the letter I received. I produced the letter and showed him that it was his name, and he admitted that it was, but that he hadn't written it. Then Adam Fitch told me something that I'm still not sure I believe, though I don't have much to go on. Everyone gets one of those letters, Adam had explained. Everyone in Shady Oaks, I mean. Everyone who lives here was brought to the town by a letter, just like yours. Even me. He paused as he handed me the coffee, then continued. Here, let me show you. He then led me to a nearby office, where hung some sparse-framed accolades and keepsakes, one of which was a letter addressed to him, which mentioned a position for a town clerk, and had been sent to him by someone named Erica Small, who was apparently a council member. All the letters are addressed from someone who currently lives in Shady Oaks, but those people never sent the letters. Adam elaborated as he sipped on his own coffee. They couldn't have. When I asked him to elaborate on this, he told me simply that no one can leave Shady Oaks, that it was impossible, and when I chuckled at him, he just shrugged and took another sip of coffee. What do you mean no one can leave? I demanded harshly, kind of getting pissed off with him. Like everyone here is just trapped? Everyone who receives one of those letters was at a desperate crossroads in life before they came here, Adam told me knowingly as he put his coffee back down on his desk. They're usually running out of options, and the town reached out to them. I rolled my eyes at him, but he shrugged and kept talking. We do need a law officer here. With you carrying that shotgun like you are, I'm guessing you know why. Most of us feel like we've been brought here for a reason, and maybe you got one too." I stood there, flabbergasted at what I was hearing. This was absolutely batshit nuts, and I was so pissed because I'd come all that way, and what this asshole was basically telling me was that there was no job. Again, I said screw it. I put the coffee cup down and just resolved to find a hotel for the night. But Adam informed me that, of course, there wasn't one. So I got him to let me out of the town hall, angrily stormed to my car, not giving a shit what was out in the dark at this point. "We'll be seeing you later, Calvin," Adam offered as I left. "It was very nice to meet you. And when you get back, just do the knock again. Though it might take me a minute if it's late. You be careful out there, son." I only barely heard him as I stalked over to my SUV. I got inside and got the engine going. I'd have to drive to Buckland or all the way to Mcmahon to find a hotel at this rate, so I just got back on the road as fast as I could. As I drove back, I did calm down, and I realized that I was actually glad that I came, because I almost certainly saved Wanda's life. And so, even with all the money spent, the trip was worth it, even though there was no job. I thought about what my next steps might be, and wondering if trying my luck out of state would be a good idea after all. I passed Wanda's car and immediately tensed, forgetting my anger and feeling stupid as hell for not paying any attention to the sides of the road, as I had when we'd come into town. I half expected one of those night-skinned horrors to jump out at me, but it never happened. Instead, I came up on and drove right into a hugely dense bank of fog, which completely blocked my sight for something like 10 feet ahead of the car. I white-knuckled it there for a bit, then the fog cleared and I could see the road again. I remember smiling in relief, and I remember that smile running away from my face when I popped over a hill and almost ran right into Wanda's car again. I swerved around it, deftly if I do say so myself, and I continued on, but silently freaking right the hell out. There was no way that wasn't the exact same sedan that I'd seen earlier. Its door was wide open and the lights were on, just as we'd left it. I couldn't turn around, so I just kept driving till I was back in town, where I could, popped a Yui the minute I was able to, and saw her ass back to Wanda's car. I passed it again and again. I drove straight into a bank of fog. Once I was through it, I slowed down a lot when I hit the rise, and sure as shit as anything, there was her car again. I did that drive 7 more times before I gave in to the reality of the situation. I eventually wandered back to the town hall, where Adam was waiting to let me back inside. I talked it out a bit, and he explained a bit more, but the bottom line was clear. I wasn't going anywhere. Coming to terms with it was easier than I expected, and it's not so bad. There's plenty of coffee, though that's mostly a stockpile. A couple of folks have gardens, and there's a working farm at the edge of town, which provides all the food we need, apparently. I found this old 90s laptop which seems to still work, so I'm keeping my reports and logs in it. There's a lot of bad shit that happens around Shady Oaks, which is why it's a good thing they got a new chief of police.